Everyone loves movies that are based on a true story, because it means you can say things like, "What a great movie, and it's based on a true story." For some reason, we human beings like it when we know that things have happened in real life at some point. If said true story ended in a happy ending, then hey, we get to feel more happy about our drab, wretched lives. And if it ends badly, well, we've all got a morbid fascination with the sick and perverse too, right? Sometimes, though, certain movies being sold as true stories aren't true at all. In fact, they're the complete opposite. They're lies, children, and you shouldn't stand for it. Burn it down, children. Burn it all down. I'm Plumpy from Whatculture.com, and here are 10 movies based on true stories that were total lies. Number 10, Fargo. Fargo opens with a black screen and a title card which reads, "This is a true story. The events depicted in this film took place in Minnesota in 1987. At the request of the survivors, the names have been changed. Out of respect for the dead, the rest has been told exactly as it occurred." And yet Fargo is entirely f***ing fictional from start to finish. Why did the Coens do this? Well, they decided that if the movie was set up as a true story from the beginning, then the audience would be more likely to believe some of the more outlandish events instead of writing them off as too ridiculous. In director Joel Coen's own words, if an audience believes that something's based on a real event, it gives you permission to do things they might otherwise not accept. That only goes wrong when someone believes there's real buried treasure out there in a frozen waste and dies looking for it, which actually happened. That is a true story. Number 9, The Strangers. If you've seen The Strangers, you'll know that it's a home invasion movie about a group of masked nutcases who, well, invade a home. The movie opens with a disclaimer that says this story was inspired by true events. What were those true events? Well, who better to explain that than the director, Brian Bertino, who also wrote the movie's script. "As a kid, I lived in a house on a street in the middle of nowhere," he recalled. "One night while our parents were out, someone knocked on the front door and my little sister answered it. At the door were some people asking for someone who didn't live there. We later found out that these people were knocking on doors in the area and if no one was home, breaking into their houses." So yeah, the whole murder thing is not based on true events, you bad liar, sir. Number 8, The Pursuit of Happiness. Will Smith plays a down-on-his-luck father who will stop at nothing to give his IRL son the life he deserves. After solving a Rubik's Cube super quickly, he finds himself in the running for a prestigious job, and the movie chronicles his attempts to win the position in a way that makes you want to cry. The Pursuit of Happiness is supposed to be based on a true story, and it sort of is, but not entirely in the vein it's depicted in the movie, which firstly makes Smith's character, Will Gardner, a nice guy. In reality, he was actually a bit of a D-bag. He wasn't anywhere near as attentive to his son as he is in the movie. He was supposedly absent and unaware of his whereabouts for a long time whilst he was out getting that prestigious job. The kid wasn't born from his wife either, but his mistress. Gardner had also been arrested for parking ticket violations and reportedly committed domestic violence on several occasions. And just to top it off, the Rubik's Cube thing, not true. Number 7, Open Water. Open Water sought to make itself more terrifying by marketing itself as a true story. What's wrong with that, you wonder? Not a lot, except for the fact that the true story is literally just some people get eaten by sharks. Open Water tells a chilling story of 2 scuba divers, Tom and Eileen Lonergan, who are left behind on a scuba diving trip and are forced to float and cry in the ocean until sharks eat them. The problem is that nobody knows exactly what happened to them. All they know is that people were left behind and that their camera was found in a shark. So there's just as much likelihood that the pair drowned or are eaten by a whale or literally anything else. Number 6, Flight. Even if you haven't got around to seeing Flight yet, you know it's that movie where Denzel Washington flies the plane upside down and it's really awesome, right? It's also a movie inspired by true events. Screenwriter John Gatins took inspiration from the 2000 crash of Alaska Airlines Flight 261. He cited the incident as the basis of the movie's plot. Of course, there are some notable differences in the movie. To avoid crashing, Denzel Washington's pilot character, Whip Whitaker, totally fictional mind, must fly a commercial aircraft upside down in order to stabilize it. In real life, Alaska Airlines Flight 261 crashed when the pilot attempted and failed to fly the plane upside down. Nobody survived the incident, not the pilot, not a single passenger. Of course, that would have made for a rather depressing and short movie, so we understand. Number 5, The Perfect Storm. No one really talks about The Perfect Storm anymore. The movie, which starred George Clooney, Mark Wahlberg, Diane Lane and John C. Reilly, tells the true story of the crew of the Andrea Gale, a fishing boat that got caught in a massive storm in 1991, nicknamed The Perfect Storm, and never returned. The names of the real-life people who died were used for the characters in the film. Problem is, this true story is actually made up of tons of different true stories collected in the book of the same name by Sebastian Junger. The only thing the movie actually depicts about the Andrea Gale that is definitely true is the fact that it went out to sea and didn't come back. Almost all of these incidents that are depicted in the film happened to other fishermen entirely. Number 4, A Beautiful Mind. A Beautiful Mind is a true story movie about John Forbes Nash, who spends his time working on governing dynamics and also having really weird hallucinations about cracking codes for the government. He eventually goes mad until he finally gets help and learns to ignore all the not normal stuff going on in his beautiful mind, or at least that's what happens in the movie, because it sure as shit didn't go down like that in real life. The biggest difference is the fact that Nash never actually had hallucinations. Nash did experience voices in his head, but that's all he experienced, voices. He wasn't spending his days imagining up Paul Bettany or Ed Harris, nor did his wife stick by his side like she does in the film. They divorced in 1963. Number 3, Hidalgo. Hidalgo, based on a true story, features a cowboy hat wearing Viggo Mortensen as Frank Hopkins, an American distance rider who became legendary for his exploits in the late 19th century. The movie also makes the claim that Hopkins is of half Indian descent, and this is where the whole true story stuff really starts to fall apart. Heavily marketed on the fact that Hidalgo was indeed factual, historians have taken particular offense disputing the legitimacy over Hopkins' ancestry, as he was likely thought to be a con man. But perhaps worst of all, the central race in the movie, which sees him travelling 3,000 miles across the Arabian desert, the main plot point, probably never even happened. Number 2, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is without a doubt one of the best and most influential horror movies of all time. One made even more intriguing due to the fact it was altogether now based on a true story. You know, of that time when a bunch of kids ended up being chainsawed to death by a leather-faced maniac out in the middle of nowhere, which is not what happened. Loosely inspired by some bad stuff serial killer Ed Gein did, the plot is actually totally fictional. Director Tobe Hooper made a conscious decision to brand The Texas Chainsaw Massacre true because he thought it would bring more people into the theaters to see it. He wasn't wrong, it made $30 million on a tiny budget of just $300,000. Lies paid. And number 1, Braveheart. Where to start? Braveheart is Mel Gibson's biopic of William Wallace, a freedom fighter who rallied his people against the evil English in 13th century Scotland. To be fair, we were cocks back then. Once again, based on a true story, it's a real stretch, given that almost everything that might have happened in reality has been manipulated into something that definitely didn't. While the general outline of the story, which has Wallace leading his people against the English, is accurate, there are tiny flecks of bollocks everywhere. Prima Noctis never existed. Kilts, not worn in the 13th century. The Battle of Stirling actually took place on a tiny little bridge. And guess what? Isabella France never actually even met William Wallace in real life, let alone romanced him, because she was a tiny child when he died. And Robert the Bruce never portrayed him either, so there you go. Braveheart, more like bullshit heart. Yeah. And that's our list. Did we miss any out? Tell us about it in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter here. I'm Plumpy from Whatculture.com, and I will see you soon.